Pastor Steve, last week, he said, Jim, how would you like to share some of your story? Not everybody knows about it. That's true for all of us. So I said yes, and then I kind of started reflecting on my life, which, again, Lent is reflecting on our story. Pastor Rick invited us to do that. And as I started digging, I started looking at some pictures, and the wheels started turning, and I put together Jim's little story with a couple slides. And I was really grateful for this passage that was read from Romans. And just that last verse, how beautiful are the feet of those who bring good news. How beautiful are the feet of those who bring good news. So it's really a story of people in my life that have really made a difference. And I'm grateful for that. Well, the story starts. The Cooper family. I'm number 4. 3 brothers and a sister. Grew up in New Jersey. My father was a carpenter. I was actually the very first Cooper within our family to get a college degree. And as we know, faith starts in the home. And my mom and dad brought me to church, or dragged the family to church every single week. And faith started really young for me. I reflected on this story when I was about, I would say, 5 years old. I was in the room with my brother next to my parents, and like all of us, you have one of those night terrors. And it cried out, and I remember my mom coming in, and just like old moms do, they get in bed with you, right? And she says, "Oh, I got you." And that's such a powerful feeling. And she whispered in my ear, she said, "And Jesus has you too." And I really remember that. Like, I felt the presence of God at that particular time at a young age. So, yay moms. I had an uncle, Uncle George, who started this mission organization back in 1957. He's still 80 years old, going strong. So as a kid, missionaries were coming through the house. The next person is my roommate in college, Larry Shell. Believe it or not, he was a Lutheran. I didn't grow up in a Lutheran church. Larry was. And in around our end of our junior year, senior year, God really got a hold of our lives. And we would listen to this tape at night and pray every night. Say, "Lord, we want to serve you." And we prayed this prayer and prayed this prayer. And I've been in full-time ministry for 30 years. And I just give thanks for that. Getting emotional. So Larry is a pastor as well up in Massachusetts. The next person, Paul Troper, he happened to be a pastor who was preaching at our church. He spoke on Isaiah chapter 6, and it's this verse that says, "Whom shall I send?" And I was like, "Oh man, really send me." College had just gotten done. Larry and I had been praying, didn't know what to do. I went up to him after church and I said, "Do you mind if I talk to you for a little bit?" He said, "Why don't we go out for lunch?" And he took me to lunch. He listened to me talk. He looked me in the eye and he says, "I think you'd be great going on the doulos for 2 years." There's the doulos. I had graduated college, 22 years old. And my uncle, part of this mission he started, was also this great ship, which I'll tell you more about it, but this ship was originally built in 1914, 2 years after the Titanic, and it has the Guinness World Book record of being the oldest passenger ship that sailed the longest amount of time. I joined this ship. Oh, wrong one. And on this ship, it's amazing. By the way, the word doulos, Pastor Rick would appreciate this. It's a Greek word from the Bible, which means servant. Paul, servant. But it's a little bit of a twist with it. It's a servant of your own free will, choosing to serve. So this ship was on a mission, sailing around the world, 350 people on board this ship from 35 nations around the world, families, and we would be invited to different countries and by the church, and we would come there and have programs on board. We had the world's largest book exhibit, where bookshop that people could come on. We had a conference facility that could sit 500. And then we had teams that would go out along the way. So just a little history on this ship. It had a ministry of 32 years. It visited 104 countries, 500 ports, and ministered to over 21 million visitors. And it was retired in 2009. I joined the ship in October 1986 in Douala, Cameroon, West Africa. And I joined it there, and I was on it all the way until 1990, April 1990, in the Philippines. Here's a couple other pictures. There's another just inside shot of the ship. In the back of the ship was a 5,000 foot book area. It wouldn't be uncommon to have 30 to 90,000 people visit the ship in, let's say, just the 3 weeks that we're there. And then the conference facilities were inside. Here's a shot of the ship when I was there in Australia. Some of the places that I was at, I visited. I actually was calculating all this stuff. I visited 70 ports in 22 countries in Africa, India, Asia, the South Pacific, New Zealand, and Australia. And that's a picture of me driving or sailing the ship. So everybody, they had no autopilot on this thing. And look, I have hair. And everyone, there's myself, my three cabin mates. One was from Switzerland, the other one was from Haiti and England. So everybody shared a room on board. And also, when you went on the ship, everyone was a volunteer and needed to raise support. Nobody got a paycheck from the captain to the last person. So when you came on board, they gave you a job. So they said, "Oh, Jim, you look like you're good at painting." "Thank you." Okay, so I was put on the deck department, and most of the time you're scraping rust and painting all day. And every now and then when you're at sea, part of the guys on the deck department would be behind the tiller steering this thing. Okay? This is a picture of us sailing into Cape Town, South Africa. That's Tabletop Mountain right there. And in addition to everybody doing the ministry, everybody had a full-time job, and then on top of that, we would get out and do things on the weekend and go to churches and do service projects and things like that. It was amazing. I kind of just found these pictures, so I'm kind of enthralled by it myself. This is a picture of me in the Philippines. So after the first year on the ship, they invited me to be a part of the advance team, and I would go ahead of the ship and prepare for it to arrive, working with the governments, working with the ports, the churches, and local communities. And that was a jeepney. And again, it's all about the people. Just so many stories of people that blessed me. It's funny, you'd have the Germans, you know what I mean? They'd be real, stiff, but they'd be saying they were really having fun. And then you'd have the Brazilians over here, and every day was a party. And so you can just imagine, you know, there's a verse in Revelation that talks about this picture where the Lamb, Jesus, is in the center, and around the Lamb is a multitude of people from every tribe, nation, and tongue. This is our future, by the way. Every tribe, nation, and tongue worshiping and praising God. And I had a little opportunity to experience that. This was a picture when I was in India doing a lineup. And I don't know if you can see the little plaque. You'd have to have really good eyes. But it says Mother Teresa. So one morning when I was in Calcutta, a friend of mine woke me up, and I actually didn't, truth be known, Rick, tell you more. The guy wakes me up, his name was Frank Brooks, and he says, "Hey, you want to go visit Mother Teresa?" And I was like, not really. I was really tired. But I said, yeah, I'm going to do it. And that morning, we went down to her little compound, and people could just go in there. And, I didn't have a personal conversation with Mother Teresa. I saw her a little bit from a distance, but that was an experience there. This is me in the Forbidden City. Had an opportunity to smuggle some Bibles into China, and the emperor wasn't available that morning, so that's a picture there. I got a picture here just again of my time in Australia. And this kangaroo was very nice. He didn't do anything to hurt me. The ship presently has been retired. A philanthropist in the Philippines, in Singapore, bought this ship. It sits in Singapore right now, and it's being outfitted to become a hotel. And again, this story of God's story of putting on the heart of one person. The idea was really this, of bringing the love of God to cities that were hard to get to, and using the ships to do that. And so today, if you Google Doulos, Logos, or today, Logos Hope still sails, you can read about that, but this ministry continues. Okay, I popped out of there. And this isn't going to go on all night. This isn't Uncle Joe's, 2-hour slideshow. But I received a scholarship when I was in the Philippines. I applied for it. I came back to Wheaton College, and did my master's degree in missions in intercultural studies there in 1990. And I called my sister. I said, when I go there, I'm going to find my wife. And a real interesting story, when I arrived in Adelaide, Australia, I was really lonely. Nobody was there. And this community of Greeks were there, the Greek people. And they were so loving and so nice. They just took care of me. I was like, this is amazing. And I actually said to myself, oh, I really want to marry a Greek one day. I really said that. And I found one at Wheaton. And she had this weird name, Carusis. And I was the chairman of the chapel committee. And she came down, and we fell in love and got married. And she has been one of those people, those beautiful feet, that have brought God's grace and love to my life. During that time, I worked at a church, Willow Creek, for a period. And then you see this banner down here, Tent Makers. Tent Makers was offering this youth ministry training. I had primarily worked with adults my whole life, so, and as you can see, I'm a kid, right? So they're like, Jim, you should be doing youth and family ministry. So that was the pilgrimage to Minnesota. I went through that training, and when I was there, one of the teachers was a pastor. His name was Blair Anderson. That's a picture of him right there. We've been friends, deep friends, since 1994. And I was the director of youth and family at Lord of Life Lutheran Church in Minnesota. And that's where the Lutheran roots started sinking down into my soul. And I have him up there because we were just together, 6 months ago at this retreat in New Mexico. I talked to him today, and I told him I'm putting him on a slide. But kudos to pastors, Lutheran pastors, because he really drew me into the grace of God. The grace of God. You know, this whole idea we want to work for our salvation, the good works, and that just leads you to a very tired place, a very tired place. And again, he would personally point me in the direction of God's grace. And I am forever grateful for that. In 2001, I got this phone call. The story goes on. 2001, February, got a phone call from Pastor Steve, been wanting to reposition to Florida. A real interesting story there. I was in a marriage care group in Minnesota with a person who was in Tent Makers organization. Well, Tent Makers also has a leadership side of their organization. That leadership side was dealing with Pastor Steve. So I'm in a marriage care group, and I confide with the group confidentially, hey, I really am thinking about moving to Florida, and I don't know what to do. Well, this guy, Sean, he reaches, he goes, I got a church for you in Florida. And he was in contact with Pastor Steve, and Pastor Steve called me, and the journey began. He also bought my house up in Minnesota, so that was great too. And I came down here, and you may not know this, but Pastor Frank and another gentleman, Tom Gimmer, and we all were called to this church in the summer of 2001. And I got to draw this to a close, but these two men, elders, have been people for the last 18 years that have allowed me to use my gifts here and to show me again what the gospel's all about. And so I thank you for that. And that's a quick, oh, by the way, that picture, that picture is a picture of Frank and Steve and I in the airport in Port-au-Prince, Haiti in 2004. So I dug that one up deep down in the slide bin. But for just a closing thought, I wrote this. I give thanks to those beautiful feet throughout my life that have brought me the good news of God. And I'm also grateful for how God has used my life and my good feet to bring the gospel. And I say this to all of us. And may that be true. And I know it is true for all of you here tonight. That the good news has been brought to you through other people. And that God is calling each and every one of us to also be the good news to others.